a couple of days ago, I was doing my normal research and catching up on the news, and I ran across a clip. And I just could not ignore that clip, and so I've included it as a part of today's discussion, which is who is responsible? And that's coming up right now. Welcome to Altitude Adjustment. So this clip, as I mentioned, the name of the clip was "The Tragedy of Jon Stewart," and I knew it had to be referring to his time at the Daily Show, because basically that's the where Jon Stewart got most of his fame. So the clip is about 5 minutes long, but I'm only going to show you 20 seconds of it, and so let me do that first.
Jon Stewart, in his mission to satirize the news, was too successful. Ultimately, his work resulted in the proliferation of the news comedy format ad nauseum, a conglomerate that has become large enough to resemble the thing they set out to mock. Let's start with news networks. They too were victims of their own success, meaning that their success made them betray their ideals.
Okay, so might be having a little difficulty here. Okay, I'm gonna try it one more time. I didn't hear the sound, and that's going to be important. There we go. One more time.
Jon Stewart, in his mission to satirize the news, was too successful. Ultimately, his work resulted in the proliferation of the news comedy format ad nauseum, a conglomerate that has become large enough to resemble the thing they set out to mock. Let's start with news networks. They too were victims of their own success, meaning that their success made them betray their ideals.
Okay, so again, I didn't hear the sound, but I'll go on with the presentation, and hopefully it's in there, and you got a chance to hear the guy talk. He was presenting an argument, and in the title was the opening statement of his argument, and then the video was all about supporting that argument. In his argument, he compares news channels to faux news channels, or late night TV. He's using cartoon imagery in his video, which also the Brady Bunch, I don't know if you noticed the Brady Bunch type graphic where you've got the different panels and it highlights each one. And it's all designed to create a sense of comedy or entertainment, or to in some way not endorse the seriousness of the argument, but to make the objects of the argument seem smaller. Also, he uses condescending dialogue to denigrate both the news and the late night, where he calls a lot of the people who moved on from the Daily Show to have their own late night shows, and he called them cronies, and he called them some other derogatory terms. So let me start with talking about news. News shows actually started on radio back in the 1920s. And then about 40 years ago, I guess, well, then they transitioned to television. I don't know, don't know exactly when they started the news shows. I'm guessing it's early because it was a part of requirement. About 40 years ago, the major networks generally did not make money on their news shows. They presented the news shows for prestige, so that it would bring good images towards their network, and they needed them to satisfy the public service requirements of Congress and the Federal Communications Commissions. They also wanted to be seen as good corporate citizens. So they were making money on their entertainment, and so news didn't become significant. Then I'm guessing somewhere in the late 80s, or I don't say guessing, somewhere in the late 80s or the late 90s, between the late 80s and late 90s, and they began to lose money on entertainment, or not make as much money on entertainment, and needed to make money on news. Now, my guess is around that time, late 70s, was when the VCR became very popular, and people would tape things that they wanted to see, and then their viewing habits changed, and when they watched TV, so television was not as much in control of what they saw when they saw it. So the guy points out that there's some sinister sort of reason for them doing that, and that they just decided that they wanted to make more money. So a company who is a for-profit company trying to make a profit and trying to provide services does have to be able to have some kind of revenue generated to be able to do that. So I don't know if he just did not know that that these things occurred, that part of it was about just staying afloat, or if he just chose to ignore that and use his platform to just berate those services. And if you go on into the video, and I'll leave a link to the video in the description so that you can go and watch the video yourself. I've watched a couple of his videos on his site, and they all are pretty much the same. He does present a conservative slant to the topics that he covers, and most of the time it's pointing out what he dislikes or what he sees as wrong with the areas that he covers. So like I said, I'll leave a link and mention Coffee Break. He has a YouTube channel, and it's called Coffee Break. So I want you to know, I'm not advocating for the guy. I'm not saying you should go watch his videos. I'm just letting you know the source of the video, and my talking about him, and I wanted to make sure I noted that. So when he attacks the television networks, and I notice this a lot when I talk to people, when you attack an organization, when you say that the organization is bad, or the organization is corrupt, or the organization doesn't care, you're not only attacking the organization, but you're attacking everyone in the organization. So if you're working at a company and house cleaning or medical services, and someone attacks the company that you work for, they're basically impugning your integrity also. I think that's a bad thing, because to believe that everyone in the organization is corrupt or is at fault for something that you believe that the organization hasn't done right is incorrect, and you paint a lot of people with a broad brush. And we all know that when you do that, you hurt more than you help, because you're lumping all of the people in with each other, and we know that different people have different varying ideas and values, and a lot of times they don't go along with management decisions, but that's the requirement of their job. And so when he does that, I disagree, and I take issue with that. I think there are a lot of people. He goes on to mention that the journalism industry has given up their values, and I don't believe that for a second. I have a few friends that are journalists, and they're just as dedicated to the idea of journalism as any person should be, as even if their ideals of when they first got into journalism and believed that they were going to change the world. Now, have some people lost that zeal and maybe don't work as hard to put forth the effort to present all of the things that they should present, or some people just lackluster and not caring about doing the job and they're just there to put in their 8 hours and go home? Absolutely. You're going to have that in any and every organization. And that's where you get turnover. People change positions. They go into a position not thinking one thing, realize that there's something different, and choose a different path. Some people stay the course and they fight the battles that are necessary for you and for me, because when they do their job and they're doing it right, we benefit. Berating them, not showing them the appreciation, because everyone in whatever job you do wants to be recognized for their effort. What has been proven time and time again, you can find it in study after study, is that most people put job satisfaction over a paycheck, over making money. So part of job satisfaction is getting recognized for the effort that you make and for the what you do to try to achieve success and greatness within your chosen field. And even if you didn't choose it, nobody really just likes to be berated. And so to take down, now you can look at my defense of the news network and you can say maybe you just have some friends there, or as I've mentioned, I do have friends that are journalists, and that's why I'm defending them. The news industry is where we get our sources of information. They are there to try to filter out noise. And then you could say, well, if they're trying to filter out noise, then they're putting their own values in the system. And what I said to you was, we all start from a place of where we've learned. There are things that we've learned that are not true. That's where conspiracy theorists are called out on the carpet, so to speak. They make statements that are unfounded, that there's no evidence for. And the job of the journalist is we can't all be at the inauguration. We can't all be at the scene of a crime or at the scene of an incident. We can't all be there. So we have to have eyes and ears that provide us with the information so that we can make informed decisions. If you look around and you say, who does that? There are only our news organizations, which help provide us with the information that we need to make competent, qualified decisions. And if we spend most of our time berating and belittling those people who do this, it can be considered a thankless job now. There was one time it was a proud job to be a journalist, and now they're under attack. And again, I'm not saying this because I just want to support the industry. What I'm saying is, if we destroy the only industry that is designed to provide us with just the facts, then we lose an opportunity to make competent, qualified decisions, because what's left is all supposition. So by him comparing news to late night television, to me is comparing apples and oranges. The news is responsible for providing, as best they can, objective facts and interpretations of what they see. Entertainment doesn't have that responsibility. Their responsibility is entertainment. News is not entertainment, though it is being presented entertainingly. it is still not entertainment. It is still information. It is still giving you what you need to make better, competent, qualified decisions. So, the thought just jumped out of my head. Many times, or you hear it a lot, where they say that an organization is biased, that it has a liberal bent on it or a conservative bent on it. In my second podcast, I talked about what to expect from me going forward. And I said I'll start from a position of where I've learned, and then I'll keep an open mind to try to ferret out the truth. No one can know everything. So that means when you go into a situation or when you go into a news story, there is a history of things that you have learned that causes you to look for certain facts. That doesn't mean that's the only facts you look for, but it gives you a point of reference in order to understand normalcy. And that has been challenged in the current political climate, because a lot of people are saying, because people are challenging behavior of a current president, that they're biased. And I don't think there's a bias. I think they understand what has normally been the standard of behavior, the expectation of people's behavior to one another. And when you veer from that behavior, they have to measure that change by recognizing where we were and where we are. That's not a bias. They're challenging his behavior, they're challenging his behavior based on it's not what we've normally been accustomed to. And they look at his behavior in the context of, if it's not what we're accustomed to, where does that behavior come from? Do we have other examples of that behavior? Do we have any other way to try to understand that behavior than to try to measure it against what we're accustomed to? So how else can you do unbiased? So if you see it in another instance and you've identified that and you report that, that's not bias. That's giving you the facts. That's giving you the facts, and then you as a citizen have to determine if you're going to believe those facts. Now, there's no real reason to not necessarily believe those facts unless you have a particular reason, unless you know that this person has purposely skewed those results. Because a lot of people who are in the journalism field make reportings that they don't necessarily agree with, but that is important to present as unbiased as they can. So as I said, we all come into a situation with our own experiences and knowledge, and then we have to challenge ourselves on, are we fairly looking at the situation? And sometimes we can say yes, and sometimes we are in uncharted waters. And so when we're on uncharted waters, when we're doing things that we haven't normally been doing, we have to take a different approach on how we become unbiased or how we look at it objectively. So I disagree with him about attacking the news service. I can't always determine what someone is thinking or feeling just by their words. I can't assume that when he put this together, his intent was to discredit news agencies. I just, in my understanding of how things work in the society, realize that the kind of conversation or the kind of information that he puts forward shines negatively on that industry. So the reason I named this episode "Who is Responsible," I believe if you see something, you're responsible for saying something. Responsibility becomes yours and mine. We are responsible. I saw something, I was concerned about it, so I said something. You listen, you hear what I say, and you have a responsibility. If you see something, say something. With the growth of the internet, the opportunity more people can participate now in the public dialogue. More people can participate in the public dialogue. The concern then becomes, whereas news agencies hold themselves to a particular standard, with all of the growth in people having an opportunity to speak, what standards do they use for their dialogue, for what they're putting forth as information? Are they thinking it through? Is it logical, rational, reasonable? Do they challenge themselves to present the best information that they can in the best situation, best way, and not just include their biases? Just decide that they don't like something and then build an argument to support that they don't like. Did they examine it from a unbiased position? Did they make the argument? One of the things that I learned in high school was, in order to have an opinion about something, you need to be able to effectively fight for the argument against what you believe. So in other words, you challenge yourself to the extreme. You push yourself just because you believe it, so then you challenge that. You challenge that to make sure that you have looked at the argument in an objective form, in an objective manner. So with the internet, there are no rules now as far as people's making statements, and it doesn't have to be founded on anything, or it could be founded on flimsy evidence. So then it becomes, since we know, and we've had this big thing about fake news and about propaganda, so it becomes upon the listener to discern the validity and veracity of the information that they consume. If you consume only one form of information, let's say, again, I try to eschew labels like liberal and conservative, but that's where we have to start from to have a conversation, so that I'm speaking a language that you're understanding. So if you're on one side of the fence and you never listen to the other side of the fence, how can you believe in your argument? Because you haven't challenged it. You only accepted it. So I encourage you to challenge yourself. I encourage you to challenge the people around you. Anyone that knows me knows if they make a statement, I will require them, I will do what I can to get them to support that statement. You just can't make a statement off the top of your head and then not fully support that. And if you give me sources that are suspect, I will pick them apart as best I can. The idea is challenging your arguments, not to make you believe what I believe, but if I do anything by making you challenge your own arguments, I've done all of us a big favor, because a lot of times people grab arguments that they don't fully vet, that they don't go back and try to understand even the context of the argument that they've accepted. They just accept it and they apply it. And the only way to get around that is for us to continue to challenge the arguments the ideas that we have and the arguments that we create. So a part of responsibility, and one of the things I wanted to cover, I saw this page, as I said, I was doing my news search, and I saw this article, and it talked about Ivanka Trump and Chelsea Clinton had come to the aid of Malia Obama against the tabloids. We as citizens determine what news is relevant, what news is important. And when we feed off of tabloid type information, we offer it a legitimacy, and we know it does a lot of damage. And so consuming that, you have to determine if that's the kind of world that you want to build. I don't know. So give me a second. Businesses have a part of the responsibility. Going back to the purpose for my podcast, understanding the relationships between business, politics, and people. Business has a part of the responsibility to do responsible behavior. Politicians have a responsibility to perform responsible behavior, and the individual, you, me, moms, dads, sons, daughters, have a responsibility to behave responsibly. Our actions, the things that we do, create the world around us. If we are intolerant, we have an intolerant environment. If we are tolerant, we have a more tolerant environment. If we are energetic, if we consume educational information over non-educational information, it defines the society that we live in, and every individual participates in that. There are no people on the sidelines. There's no subs to come in the game. We are it. So I encourage you. I listened to this guy's video. I was disappointed because I thought the language was incendiary over instructional, or even something, investigatory. And so I left a message. I did participate in a conversation, and I know that there was a long list of people that were contributing to the conversation, and so mine is going to be one of many, which may or may not get seen, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is that I took an action. I saw something that I thought needed attention, and I took an action, and I encourage you to do that. Take an action. Never let an opportunity pass that you can't contribute. Never let an opportunity pass that you can't correct or reprove. Because if you don't do it, who's going to do it? I'm going to wrap up this episode today. I don't know, talk about myself a little longer, or talk a little longer. But so let me say that, I am going to be off for the month of December. January 6th, 2018, I will return. That's a Saturday at 2 p.m. You can replay the video podcast here on YouTube. It's also available on Stitcher, podcast.com, SoundCloud, iTunes Store, and the Google Play Store. And the internet is powered by your likes and shares and the comments. Like and share this episode where you find it, and consider leaving a comment, because it matters. As always, be cool, be calm, but above all, be careful. Look out for the other guy, because he might not be looking out for you. Until next time.